Hello, everybody. This is Jack Maseko with the Moving into the Future podcast. Today, I'm joined by Oliver Petrovic from Savills. Oliver, thank you for joining us today. Just for our listeners, a little background. Oliver has been in the commercial real estate industry for 15 years. He's been at Savills for 9 years, where he's a managing director. He's seen a lot over the course of his years in the New York City market, and we're excited to have him on today to talk a little bit about his history in the industry and the New York City market in general. Oliver, thanks for joining us today.
Jack, great to be here. Glad we finally got to do this. We've been talking about it for a while.
We have been, and this is our first guest outside of the organization to come on. So I really appreciate you coming on and being a part of it. This is going to be very exciting.
Humbled. This is great. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's really start at the beginning. I think as listeners can hear, you do have an accent. You are from England. You came here when you were 18 years old with kind of a hope and a dream. Is that correct?
Yeah, and less gray hairs.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was it's 22 years ago I got here, and just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and had no expectations other than let's try and do something in the States and go to college and see what happens.
Right. And then when you came here, you did not have any ambitions, initially to get into commercial real estate, right? I mean, you were mostly focused on soccer and football. And
having fun.
Taking it from there. Yeah, right, exactly.
That's it. No, I think I wasn't probably too dissimilar to many people going into college, in that you kind of get into college and you're not sure what you want to do. And I thought I wanted to be a doctor. And so I had this ambition of I'm going to study biology, but, got to the States and figured out, what organic chemistry was all about, and biochemistry and genetics, and, quickly learned it perhaps wasn't for me, but I did finish my degree in biology. So that was the one thing that I finished what I started, which I was happy about, but had no idea that I was going to end up in real estate, and really was kind of a bit stuck at the end of college. Like, what's next? Where do I go from there?
Right, exactly. And I think that's a position that a lot of people have been in. I went to school for sports management and was in a similar position where I got done and realized that the opportunities there weren't as plentiful as I was hoping for. And, I pivoted and I found new opportunities, and I believe that's what you did too. I think you were living with your girlfriend, and then you were working at like a smoothie bar, right?
That's right. You just got to make some cash however you can.
That's it.
I was living with my girlfriend and worked at a smoothie restaurant in Long Island, and it wasn't the American dream that I had hoped for, but I was working towards it, and that's, I was being nimble and agile, and kind of just, finding your nose and figuring things out. And I think that's probably been a nice segue into real estate, because sometimes it is trying to sniff out opportunities and, try and search where the next step is or the next opportunity is.
Right. And just stepping back a little bit, there are certain qualities that lead you into these type of roles, whether it is real estate or even moving for myself, where, it's you eat what you kill, and you got to go out there, and get it. And, they don't call New York City the concrete jungle for just giggles. It really is, a fight out there, and there's a lot of opportunity, but you really got to go out there and get it. And just kind of pedaling back a little bit, you did play soccer in college, and excuse me, I call it soccer, American football.
It's all good. We'll let you off.
Yeah, exactly. But, how do you think that really helped you kind of create who you are and create some valuable qualities and skills and practices that, you take into what you do today?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, look, these interviews with pro athletes are not the best measure of, how sports can prepare you for what they always say. We had adversity, and we got through it, and that's why we were successful. And I didn't really have any adversity in sports, but what I did have was sort of discipline and sort of commitment to saying, I'm not going to play pro. I'm not going to, make money and make this a career after college. I knew that early on. But I still put in kind of the hard hours and the commitment to it and the dedication that I had of myself, and also I think what the team would have expected of me. To be a 4-year starter and to show up to practice when it's raining and, hold yourself accountable. And I think that kind of sets the foundation, a good foundation for wherever you end up, whether it's in sports or, whatever career field you end up in. I don't think anything bad comes of that. It's only positive stuff. So those were the lessons that I learned through college. And some people say that's the argument that college has as well. Like, are you really going there for school, or are you learning routines and disciplines and kind of finding your feet? And that was sort of all encompassing for me, both on the academic side and the athletic side, but also being a foreigner in a new country,
Right.
and kind of packaging it all together and saying, who do you want to become, and, what's important to you, and maturing at an early age.
Exactly. And that, team aspect too, that sport offers, and especially being a foreigner too, being a part of that team allows for some stability, but also, the concept of accountability too, which is very important, in your professional career as well. So I certainly understand that. As well. So yeah, you're looking at it from two different vantage points right now. You had the foundation of sports and the discipline and accountability that you mentioned, and then you get done with that and sports is over, and now you're really just fighting to survive. Not to sound dramatic, but as a figure of speech, and you wound up just living with your girlfriend and working where you could. And then, real estate kind of came to your doorstep, and tell us about how that opportunity presented itself.
Yeah, it was, I don't want to say sort of the stars aligned, but it was just sort of not even good fortune. It just happened the way it did, in that I didn't know the career path after college that kind of spoke to me, and was with my girlfriend and thought, well, I need to get a job. What field, what industry, what excites me, and still had no clue. But I'd at least, kind of closed the chapter on medicine. I knew that I didn't have the grades, I wasn't going to med school, I hadn't done an internship at any hospitals. So again, the foundation I think that is needed and expected for kind of the further education in medicine or in law or in teaching, I just didn't have that. I played rugby in college as well, so I was a two-sport athlete. I enjoyed social life, like I did everything. So I kind of just started applying to jobs online. I mean, I don't know if people still do that these days. Like they just happy click and just apply for everything.
Shout out Indeed.
Yeah, there you go. That wasn't a plug, but that's what I was doing. Kind of a lot of deer in headlights, just lost, and spending time on the internet and applying for jobs and submitting my resume, and applied for what was a brokerage position. I knew nothing about it, and got a call back from the recruiter, and he said he was going to be flying to New York, and got my resume and wanted to interview me. And unfortunately, the time that he was arriving in New York, I was actually taking a vacation with my wife. We were going to Florida for a week, and I said to him, look, I'm not going to be around, unfortunately, that week. It's sort of spring break. People are going to be out of town. I've got this booked. I've had it booked for months. Can I do a phone interview? And he said, listen, it's not an option. Like, we do in person. We'll meet a bunch of candidates in New York City. I said, well, can I fly to Chicago? They were headquartered in Chicago. We're not going to be around. We're kind of doing the recruiting tour through all the major cities in the US. And so that was it. I said, okay, I'm sorry. I mean, there's nothing else I can do. And got back from Florida. A couple of months go by, still making smoothies. And I got a call back, same guy. We didn't find anyone in New York. We're going to be back, next month. What's your availability like? And of course, I was free and met him and met my partner at the time that was going to be hiring me. And he said, go get your real estate license and the job is yours. And that was, that was summer of, 2016, 2017, something like that. So it was, the stars did align in some regard, but it was, a bit of luck and timing, and that's how I fell into it. And I think a lot of people, if you talk to a number of people in the industry today that have been in it sort of 10, 15, 20, 25 years, it's changed now that you can go to college and there are undergrad programs in real estate and facilities management and engineering that kind of, at least from the outside in, correlate well to real estate, unlike biology.
Right.
But, I think it just worked out the way it did for, just for good fortune.
Right. And you mentioned too, you said 2017, but I think you meant 07, correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
I said 17.
Yeah.
That would have made it 5 years.
But that's an important date though, 07, because that is 1 year before the crash of 08.
That's right.
And that is an interesting time to really get your career started. I did the same thing at the advanced group where I started, right when COVID hit. So, tell us about that, because that certainly presents its challenges. And, what was that like back then? Because I was still in college at the time, and so I wasn't I was in college, and as you could talk about the social life and stuff, I wasn't really concerned
In the
with
5-year
any
program.
Of that. Exactly. Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Unofficial masters.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. But what was that was like being new in your career and navigating through that? How did you approach that? Well, what did you do that allowed you to push through and last?
That was one of the big kind of like pulls and lures to getting into the business. At the time, all people were talking about was how much money they were making. And it was, a super hot market. It was, riding the wave. And, I started this real estate firm, and then all of a sudden just, the world shuts down.
Right.
And, admittedly, it was just ignorance. I didn't know much about business or the city or the economy or real estate or the impact of, the financial markets and the housing market collapsing. It was just carry on, honestly. I didn't look too much into it. I didn't pay, too many minds to it. I kind of just carried on as I was doing leading up to that. And, the conversations kind of told me everything I needed to know. I was talking to, CFOs and heads of real estate and COOs, and was asking them about their real estate and their space and their employees, and their response wasn't just hanging up the phone. It was, I don't know if I'm going to have a job or a company in 6 months. So the last thing I need to do is talk to you about real estate right now, which, okay, that's just as good as a no, then you just keep going. And so a lot of the people that I started with left the business within that year, sort of the 08 to mid 09. Maybe they saw the writing on the wall and just thought it was going to be such an uphill climb and a long climb thereafter, which it was. But I kind of just kept working through it and, came out the other side with, some good life lessons and a better understanding of, having lived through a cycle. And, again, set somewhat of a foundation for, at least what we've been through in the last 18 months, right? Another blip in the system,
right.
And kind of sticking with it and being patient. And that's been, kind of a reoccurring theme.
Certainly is. And so what I find interesting now, where are you from in England?
So I grew up in Essex.
Essex.
Essex is like the county to the east of London.
Right. So, and as far as it being a metropolitan area, is there a downtown where there is office space, maybe not similar to like a New York, but say like a, Philadelphia or something like that? What is the landscape there like? The only reason I ask is because what I found when I got involved in real estate in general and like office space, you start to look at it different. And like, when you went back to England, and even to London, not just Essex, how do you look at it differently now? How do you look at space differently? And how does space compare internationally to here?
Yeah, so Essex is a county, but our counties are like your states.
Right.
So, it's a mixed bag. It's rural, it's metropolitan in certain areas of Essex. London always feels like the baby brother to New York. It's a lot more dispersed.
Right.
It's not as concentrated because you're not stuck on an island, obviously. Right. But, I think progressing through my career, I think you tend to appreciate architecture a bit more now.
Certainly.
I mean, early on it was just that's a building and there's offices in there and people sit in there and work. And now you kind of gravitate towards certain details and you notice things differently and you appreciate architecture and you appreciate kind of the monumental effort it takes and the expense to develop something or build a new building out of the ground. And obviously the UK and London specifically has got some incredible architecture, as does a lot of Europe. But being in my backyard, it's been nice to go back and then kind of see the similarities, but also those unique differences that make London what it is.
Right, and that's especially what I like about traveling in Europe too. You have to remind yourself that there are buildings there that are older than America as a whole, which like is quite like a thought to think. Just passing over our birthday actually last week, I think it was 245 years. There are buildings in London and throughout Europe that are 300, 400 years old and have been repurposed and have become office buildings or retail spaces, and it's always very fascinating to me to be over there and see how that space functions, and that kind of leads into what we're looking at here in New York now is the function of space and how tenants and just people in general are using space now coming out of the pandemic. What have you been seeing from your clients and how they are approaching their space now, whether it's their existing space or they're looking for new space? What have you been seeing a lot? What type of questions and what type of concerns or areas of interest are you seeing from your clients in the market?
It's a bit of a mixed bag, I think, question and answer.
Right.
Again, depending who you ask, but it's very specific to each company. You can't really make a generalization about it, but specific clients, I think we're seeing similarities between now and some other kind of downturns, but also some reoccurring questions, which have always been, which is like the biggest question is, how much space do I take? Am I taking enough? Am I taking too much? And how to manage that growth. But I think the last 12 months have taught us more about company culture and employee engagement
Right.
and work-life balance, and improving that balance at the office, even if you can't work from home all the time. So you've at least committed to the fact that you need to commute in or you need to work in your office, but how can we make that more engaging for the employees so that they actually enjoy spending time at the office? So workplace has been this buzzword that's been flying around for the last few years,
Right.
And we've got a super talented workplace strategy group in-house at Savills, and they've been really busy because that's the forefront of every organization right now. Yes, we have a lease. How do we bring our employees back? How do we keep them focused? How do we keep them safe? And let's understand what's important to them and try and implement that in our space going forward. Now's a great time to kind of effectuate that change.
Right.
Particularly if you're looking at addressing your real estate, whether it's growth or downsizing or a restructure of an existing obligation. But also use that time wisely to kind of, poll your employees and talk to the key stakeholders and talk to departmental heads and figure out, if you could start over, what would you want, or how would you do it differently, or do you need more conferencing, do you need more soft seating? So there's a lot of that conversation going on at the moment, in addition to what's the financial burden that we have and how can we make smarter decisions about our real estate going forward.
Right, and part of that exodus from New York City too was like lower rents and things like that, and a lot of companies, you see the Facebooks of the world, the Apples of the world, who really snatched up real estate and took that as an opportunity to get space at a discount essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Are you seeing that too with a lot of tenants? Not so much, because one of the things that I found fascinating with the pandemic was limiting commuting. That was like obviously, the New York City subway is disgusting.
Yeah.
So, the less you can take that, the better. And clients and tenants were using the city almost as like a campus structure where, they might have a space in Brooklyn, they might have a space in Manhattan, maybe Long Island, what have you. Have you been seeing that at all in terms of dispersing a portfolio a little bit in that regard?
Yeah, I think it's, again, organization specific and headcount specific.
Right.
The average, 50-person company is probably not going to get too much in the weeds with that.
Certainly.
But when you start getting up to the 100, 200, 300 or larger portfolio companies that have perhaps a few dots on the map, or at least they have, the mothership in New York, and they want this distributed workforce model where, Florida and Carolina and Texas and Austin and, the certain states and cities started getting traction when people realized that their employees were going to these places during the pandemic, and had at least voiced that if we could do this, kind of going forward, they have no problem relocating there. There's obviously a ton of capital and expense involved in doing that,
right.
And perhaps salary adjustment, which has been, an argument that companies have made as to justifying people coming back.
Of course.
Like, listen, you can work in Florida, but we're going to pay you Florida salary.
Right.
You can't pay, the New York rate if you're in Florida because you've got, capital gain, you've got, state income tax improvements, and so it sounded great initially. Some people have been successful at it. Some businesses have done well, but it's not for everyone. And I think I think the honeymoon phase is over for a lot of people.
Yeah, that was a bit of a pipe dream and kind of wishful thinking, and maybe like the farthest end of the spectrum of this new, workplace frontier that we're seeing. And for some companies, like you said, it certainly does work, and there is certainly some potential there. We at the Advanced Group did relocate a number of people, more so than other years, and especially during a pandemic, outside of the state to, the Floridas, the Carolinas, like you mentioned, the Texases. I also did a number of moves, both commercially and personally, from California to Texas, which was like, just a caravan.
California had a tough run.
It did. It really did. It really did.
Like the fires weren't enough.
Right, exactly.
We're going to dump everything else on you.
Exactly. So they got some work to do there for sure. But what I was getting at was in the sense of, what percentage of your clientele even like entertain that approach as far as those type of satellite offices, because it is a special type of company, it is where the headcounts have to be, over 200 at least, to do something like that. Were you seeing a lot of clients asking the question, what would our portfolio look like if we had if we limited our space in New York and then opened up a space in like a Carolina and a Florida? Were those questions you were getting?
Yeah, I think it's been a conversational piece again. There's a misconception, I think, for executives and business owners that you're in a lease and you're not getting any rent relief last summer and there was no deferrals and
right.
That's it. You kind of have your lease and you're paying your rent and that's it. There's nothing else you can do. There's always something you can do.
Right.
And part of that activity is exploring other ways in which you can manage your business, manage your real estate, manage your people. Is there something else that you can be doing? And we've had a lot of those exploratory conversations over the last 12 months, even with people that are smaller companies, 30, 40, 50 people, to say, what about if we keep a PO address in New York and move 95% of our employees out of state?
Wow.
So there's a lot of that conversation going on because people like to know what others are up to.
Exactly.
They want to aggregate that peer data to know what competitors or peer groups are doing. It helps them justify or rationalize a decision one way or another.
Certainly.
And it gets the messaging right to their employees as well. Like, we're big believers in New York. We thought and think this is temporary. We're making a commitment to improve the environment and the culture for the company.
Certainly.
And we've listened to your questions and your queries, and this is our game plan going forward. Or we hear you. We hear that you like remote work, or you'd like to be in a different environment, or you're tired of the subway and the commuting and the metropolitan feel of the office or the culture that we're building. We're relocating to South Carolina.
Certainly.
So I think bringing all of these resources to the table and having those conversations, it's been the perfect time for that because, the city was like a ghost town last year.
It was.
There was no one around and people were in leases with not a lot to do other than perhaps apply for PPP and, keep their employees engaged as much as possible with the work that they had in front of them.
Exactly. And as you speak about that, these different options and different approaches and stuff like that, I think that's what Savills and the Advanced Group both have in common as far as kind of being that one-stop shop for all of these questions, all of this planning. One of the things, if companies do have that P.O. box in New York, but they want to set up offices in Carolina, that's where we can help. They're a New York company, we're a New York company, but we can help get you started in wherever it may be. You mentioned Carolina, just as easy as if you were in New York. And I think that's the same approach that you would take at Savills too. It doesn't matter the market. We are a industry expert who is really here to make sure this transition, whatever it may be, whether it's back to the office in New York or in another market elsewhere, as easy as possible for all of your employees. Because one of the things I wanted to mention too is when you're making those changes, not only does it show that you're listening to employees, but it also keeps you competitive. Again, referencing back to sports, the franchises or clubs who tend to fail are the ones who, rest on their laurels. You see it with like Barcelona right now. Mm-hmm. So, that's the same with any organization is you have to be dynamic and you have to be willing to change. And again, we can help manage that change. So, as we transition to one of the things I've really enjoyed about Savills, even before I knew you too, is, a couple of their different internal branches and offerings. And for our listeners, let me just kind of paint the picture a little bit. Savills is the largest global tenant rep in the world, meaning that...
It's a mouthful.
It is. I did a good job getting that all out there too. Meaning that they exclusively represent the tenants through the real estate transaction. So comparable to other large real estate firms where they will also be landlords and tenant reps, Savills is exclusively tenant reps. And that means that they continually have the tenant's best interest in mind. And with that, offer certain services internally that are specifically unique to Savills. And that's correct in saying, right?
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, we're completely occupier focused. So the end user, the people that are actually going to be sitting in an office, those are our clients. It's not the building owner, it's not the landlord, it's not the developer. We do some of that work, throughout the globe, but specifically in the US, it's the end user that are our clients, and we're focused on, protecting and mapping out that their business plan and their real estate plan align as closely as possible. And part of that has been what we were just talking about, like, where do you have your employees? Where are your clients? Is there an interaction, or is it just, people in an office? Where do you draw talent from? Where are the labor pools that are important to you as an organization going forward? And one of the groups that we brought in-house a few years ago was Kelly Consulting Group, KLG, who they live and breathe consulting, state incentives, and labor analytics day to day. That's essentially what they do. So when you talk about this distributed workforce model, or an existing client that has perhaps a portfolio of offices, 10, 15, 20, 100 locations, all throughout the world, but specifically in the US, where's a logical place to either retain an office or perhaps open up a new one or move one to? And these guys really dig into the data around, how are you going to grow that office? Where are you going to pull employees from? How are you going to recruit and retain that employee base? And those are key decisions, because that's really going to, obviously drive the profitability of the company, but also, keep the culture consistent across the brand. You saw that. You must have seen that globally, right?
I did, yeah, correct, exactly. And I did see those decisions being made internally at a company. Why are we going to start in this city? There were some internal data that allowed us to even, think about it. We would see, whatever clicks per day or however you may see, like, okay, this is a hot market for us, but how can we make it grow? And that information is so key, specifically for hiring. What type of talent can you get out of these markets? And then not only that, but if you're building an office out there, where you're building that office to attract that talent is so vitally important. Mm-hmm. What is around there? What restaurants? What transportation stations? All of those things. And to have, again, an internal team who can assist you with that is so incredibly valuable, because, one of the things that I constantly remind myself is the people who you're dealing with, specifically C-level executives, just because they're C-level executives does not mean they know about real estate or about, workplace strategy.
Or moving,
exactly.
Anything.
Yeah,
Furniture.
exactly. None of that. So, that's why we're here to assist them and provide them with that valuable information that they wouldn't even think to, ponder. And that's where we can be of great value for them. And then the other really interesting branch of Savills that I've really enjoyed learning more about is work there. And again, part of the discussion, and before we talk about work there, I'd like to get your opinion on it as a whole, is the shared office space and that function of, real estate and options for companies to have is shared office space. So, they might have, let's say, hypothetically speaking, they're going to try out a new market, but we're going to start with a shared office space and then let it grow organically from there and kind of grow our space with our hiring.
It's a perfect segue without, committing too long term and,
right.
and overexposing yourself or the business.
Right. And what are your thoughts on shared office space as a whole, as its like position in the market? You know, what do you see as its value, and what do you see as its future?
It's been a bumpy road,
Yeah.
right? For, we can say WeWork, right?
Yeah,
WeWork
I was
is,
there.
so yeah, it's all right. Over the last, decade, if you will, Regis, IWG spaces, they've been around for a long, long time. WeWork were born, obviously out of Brooklyn and just exploded, right concept, right time, arguably wrong management and organizational structure internally. But they got onto something. And again, it was at the time when people coming off the back of the Lehman Brothers collapse in the housing market and perhaps were out of jobs and finally were almost forced in a way to follow their passion and start a company from, their basement and say, you know what, I want to do my own thing and be an entrepreneur, but I want to be around those people too. And like, where's a place for me to go and do that? So it was perfect timing. And I think now we may be at a point of we've kind of figured out the kinks. There's obviously been a lot of change at WeWork, and they're trying to stabilize the ship and right-size themselves after that, massive, I guess, 5-year growth plan that they had,
Right.
just opening everywhere.
Right.
Notel obviously filed for bankruptcy.
Yep.
So a lot of their spaces have gone back to the landlords, and they're in the courts and so forth. So I think there's absolute relevancy for it going forward, for the points that you open with. I mean, it's ideal for certain headcounts, certain stages that a company may be at. You may, maybe a year into the business or 2 years in, and you're still not ready to, plant the flag and commit long term. But having said that, I think traditional landlords are also becoming more flexible to the notion that, the age of the tenant coming in, and by the way, tenants are still doing this, but the age of certain tenants coming in signing 10 or 15-year leases, you really have to have either incredibly stable business,
Right.
or tons of visibility that it's going to make sense for you. And there's a portion of the market that still works for. But then you've got this bulk of the market where perhaps the 5-year lease makes sense as opposed to 10, or the 7 instead of 15, or the 3 instead of 10.
Right.
And I think flex office space is kind of the conduit or the bridge between
Exactly.
the one person month to month and then the 10-year lease, and it's an option and an alternative to perhaps a 1 to 3 year lease now.
Right.
And I think that's the segment that it's going to survive best in.
Yeah.
And thrive in.
Yeah, I certainly agree. You put it nicely there as like the conduit to the bridge to that 3-year lease. And
it's a stepping stone.
Exactly.
And if you want to stay in it because you like the model and it makes sense and the location's great and it's just easy having an organization take care of everything for you, and you don't have to staff a receptionist, you don't have to worry about
Right.
the food and beverage component for your office.
Even meeting spaces, and conference rooms, and bringing tenants, or not tenants, but clients into the, space, and having a place to meet that is reliable, and it's
Maybe
good.
you do it forever.
Right, exactly.
That's okay.
You never know, yeah. Yeah, and one of the things, too, while I was at WeWork that we really started and, tried to build on there was the enterprise model. And, for that company, not even that, but we also had it was like office headquarters by we, HQ
That's right.
by we.
You get a whole floor.
Exactly.
It's like your space, but it's still managed by them.
Right, precisely. And it was a perfect option for that company that may have started with 2 employees, grew to 20s, and now wanted a space set for 50. And then, from 50, then you become an enterprise client. So they really, paved the way for growth there. And that was one of the things they did well. But now, stemming back to work there, what I understand work there as is basically a search engine for shared office space in different markets and helping tenants understand what their best options may be, whether it based on location, whether it based on affordability, size, whatever it may be. There are different filters that clients can go into work there and find what is the best fit for them in a shared office space. That is essentially what work there does. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we've got a dedicated team that run our work there service, both in North America and also throughout Europe. And the original way that people would do this is you've got a client and they say we want to open an office up in Los Angeles for one person. And traditionally, as a broker, you would call, if you had an office as an organization, you would call your office out in LA, or perhaps call someone that you knew in that office and had a relationship with and said, Jack, I've got my client in New York is XYZ, and the managing partner or the CEO is relocating to LA. He wants an office out there for one person. Can you help me out? And then it would be incumbent upon that broker in LA to kind of scour the market for one office and evaluate all the options and, present them and kind of kick it back to you so that when the CEO's out there, he can kind of just do the tour and see everything. And it was a bit of a cumbersome, antiquated, and candidly, a not very rewarding way, at least to the broker, to kind of manage a one-person account.
Right.
So trying to preserve your client relationship, it's all about, like you were talking about, the full service, end-to-end delivery as a business. And so work there, we're able to pass on these certain requests to them where they're, very size and location specific. And the their platform has a live plug and a feed into all the flex office providers that exist.
Right.
There's no downside for them being involved with WeWork. So if we were looking at, let's just say, a WeWork in Los Angeles, they have up-to-date daily information on all the availabilities and all the pricing for a one-person office in the LA market. So within a matter of minutes, we're able to churn back that report to me. I don't have to call my colleague in LA anymore.
Right.
And so brokers that either don't have an office out there or didn't have a relationship would kind of be left scrambling. Like, do I fly out there? What do I do? Do I call a friend that may know a broker out there? And then there's that consistency in deliverables and, company image that you're trying to put forth. So having this resources in-house has been really, really helpful.
Certainly.
And they kind of just run with it and take it and manage it. And the client is getting the same experience as if it was me working with them.
Exactly. And from a time and knowledge standpoint, that is so incredibly valuable as a tool because, like you said there, rather than scrambling, rather than trying to figure out a market you may not be familiar with, you have a technology that offers a reliable search to get you the information you need quickly. And again, from a service standpoint, you can turn that over to your client and really provide them with a foundation of knowledge that is going to help them make that decision. So kind of to paint the picture here as we finish up, what we just talked about as far as, Oliver representing a tenant in the market as a client, and they're looking in a new market. Savills internally has an internal team who can help you understand the demographic at that market, who you're going to be hiring for, what are the key variables that you need as a part of that office, whether, like I said, it be transportation, entertainment, what have you in that regard. And then also alternative options for standard leasing office space with work there that can provide shared office space options, not just at WeWork, but also the Industriouses, the Convenes, the smaller workplace options or shared office space options as well that, can help you flourish in that new market. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, that's really great. And I mean, again, as somebody who has sat on that end user side, that's an incredibly valuable service and just, information and wealth of knowledge to have. It really is. So Oliver, again, I really appreciate you coming on. And, just as we finish up, again, you are a football player from England. How you feeling going into the match with Denmark today?
Look, I feel great.
Yeah.
I feel great. I think not the hard work's done, but we had some hard matchups before. So England 2-0.
Oh, England 2-0, that's the call?
2-0. That's what I'm expecting of the boys is 2-0. So hopefully you won't text me after today and make me eat my words.
No, I hope not either. Well, we'll have you on again, so we'll talk about it.
I got to come back and we got to talk. We got to relive it. But it's in England,
right?
And then the final is in England.
I mean,
it's
come
at
on,
Wembley. So how do you not deliver on that?
That's what I'm saying.
But the pressure's on, right? The pressure's on now for England to deliver and the fans. And there's been this July. I don't get into politics, but there's been this July 19th date where England's supposed to open up from the COVID lockdown. So I think fans and the momentum and the energy of the country is really like they've got something to get behind.
Right.
This would be the perfect segue to winning the Euros, and then the country opens up within a week after that, and you know, the Brits can enjoy the rest of their summer.
I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Because this would be the first time in like 25 years, right? I mean, it was 96 last time, right?
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, you guys, you deserve it. You deserve it after everything we've gone through. I'll be rooting for them too. I have Italian heritage, but you know, I'll root for England on this one.
That'd be a fun final.
Yeah, it would be. Italy, because who's Italy playing?
Italy beat Spain yesterday.
Oh, that's right.
On penalties.
Oh, wow.
So they're in the final. They're waiting.
Nice.
They're waiting for England or Denmark. So, have you been to Italy?
I have not. That's actually one of the few places in Europe I haven't been, is like the Mediterranean area.
Mm-hmm.
I've done more like northern London, Dublin, Amsterdam, Berlin. But I haven't gotten down to the Mediterranean yet. It's next year. I'm planning on it, as a matter of fact. I'm actually working on a dual citizenship.
Nice.
Yeah, in Italy. Me and my family have a gateway to get there. So when that happens, which it should be finalized this year, and then we'll get the passport next. We'll make our way over there.
That'd be exciting. Yeah. Like once you get in there, it's easy to travel around.
Exactly. The EU passport is so valuable.
I spent a lot of time in Spain growing up. It's sort of the dumping ground for Brits in the summer. Kind of New Yorkers go to Florida.
August, you go to Ibiza. Yeah.
And so everyone ends up in Spain. But Spain's a beautiful country, and I've done a lot of Europe. It's one of the huge benefits of being in the UK and in Europe. It's easy to travel around.
Right.
But I also have never been to Italy either. So it's definitely on on the bucket list to go and check it out.
Yeah.
Only good things.
Certainly. So maybe next time we talk, hopefully England's got to win, and we're planning trips to Italy.
We'll do the podcast on a boat in the Mediterranean.
Now we're talking. Right? Now we're talking. Once this thing takes off, Oliver, thanks again. I really appreciate it, man. All right.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yep. Take care, everybody.
Be sure to subscribe to our podcast at theadvancedgrp.com. That's theadvancedgrp.com.